One of these days I'm gonna have a consistent setup. That day is not today. Hello media lovers, my name is Maya, but you can just call me Media Head. So, 2020 in the new year. And this title. Need I say more? Listen, 2020 had a lot of events in it that have been described as borderline or just straight up apocalyptic. And with 2021 starting off like the way it's starting off, we can probably guess that it's going to take a bit of time for things to improve. And if you're like me and you're an American, you're probably feeling an intense amount of apocalyptic doom. So what better way to deal with my emotions about all of this bullshit and just make a list about my favorite apocalypses? This is healthy coping. Some ground rules. An apocalypse for the sake of this list is defined as any event that results in the end of the world, not a simple single landmass. It has to be the world. Post-apocalypses were also considered for this list, and the world is allowed to repair itself to a degree. However, there still have to be remains or traces of how the world once ended, or proof that it hasn't gotten back to its original state. Dystopias were also considered for this list, but again, they have to be part of a world that ended on a grand scale, so A Handmaid's Tale and Battle Royale were immediately disqualified. The rating of the apocalypse depends on the apocalypse itself as well as the story written around the apocalypse, and the better those two elements, the higher the ranking. And finally, like before, non-visual media like books or podcasts are not going to be considered for this list. It just makes it easier on me. And with that, let's get to ranking my top 5 favorite apocalypses. Say hello to the only entry on this list that's not here specifically because of its apocalypse scenario. Zombies are a pretty generic apocalypse scenario. So generic that Zombieland decided to call attention to it very casually by having their zombie apocalypse start by a strain of mad cow disease being mutated and patient zero getting it from eating a burger. If that doesn't set the tone for this entire movie, I don't know what does. My love of Zombieland primarily comes from the characters and the editing. The characters in this movie are fucking fantastic. You have a Twinkie-loving, gun-toting maniac, a sister duo fluent in the art of manipulation and heists, and Jesse Eisenberg playing a character. Does that man know how to play a bad character?
No man in the sky intervened when I was a boy to deliver me from daddy's fists and abominations.
Bill Murray's in this movie too. I have no idea why he's in this movie, but his presence makes it so much better for the time he's in it. Until Columbus shoots him.
No! Is that how you say hello? Where you come from?
Columbus, Tallahassee, Wichita, and Little Rock becoming this little found family is definitely the best part of this film. Though that may be my bias towards the found family trope in general speaking. And if that doesn't sell you, the little edits of Columbus's rules just popping up out of nowhere will definitely do it for you. I don't care what anyone says, these edits aged well and they look hilarious. I don't know what else to say. Zombieland is just a solid good time. And even if it's not objectively the best, it's not even objectively the best zombie film I've seen, it still made me smile and I found it good enough to buy it. Let me repeat that. I am a college student, and I found a film so good that I bought it with actual money. That should tell you something. Please tell me I'm not the only one who knows what this is. Imagine, if you will, an ice age that devastated the Earth so much that humans decided to just give up on the Earth and leave it, taking to the stars. And so much time has passed that the idea of the Earth itself became a myth. And now, humans are constantly in a war with alien monsters in a fight for survival. Then, a lone teenage militant named Lado falls through a wormhole and wakes up in a strange place. only to realize that it's Earth, the surface of which is now completely submerged. The Earth is now completely habitable again, but it's a giant ocean, and civilizations now consist of fleets of ships and have no memory of the strange thing called land. Humanity has been split in two, between those who left the Earth and those who stayed, and so much time has passed that they forgot that the other half existed. My love of this anime comes, like many things, from the character interactions. You have Amy, your classic Genki girl who just wants everyone to get along, Babel, Amy's younger brother who uses a wheelchair, who single-handedly breaks Leto's top philosophy that the so-called weak should be left to die, Bellows, who takes no shits and basically acts like everyone's older sister, and our main man himself, Leto, who has no idea what he's doing, but he's trying.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Amy.
I've adopted him. It may not be as pretty as a Ghibli apocalypse and isn't as well written as other anime, but I just enjoy seeing this tight-knit crew and their adopted space boy just go about their day and figure things out. And that's not even getting into the stuff that I refuse to spoil. No, I'm not giving hints. It's on Hulu if you're interested. Listen. The cause of this apocalypse is so batshit insane that it had to go on this list. I wasn't sure what I was expecting when I learned who forced 15 kids into a death game while trapped in the school that they were supposed to attend, but it wasn't this! So for a basic rundown of the plot of the first game, 15 students, called Ultimates, or super duper high school level if you're being a weeb about it, which basically means that they're the best at what they do by their given age, are meant to attend this school. They end up being knocked unconscious, waking up in that same school, and then being given a choice by a robotic bear to either kill someone and try to escape the school, or die in the school. By the end of the game, you learn two really important things. 1. 2 years have actually passed since that time they were quote-unquote knocked out and woke up in the school. And 2, their memories have a gap in them because they were forcefully removed from them so they wouldn't remember the fact that they locked themselves in the school. Because the world outside had ended. To sum up what happened to cause the apocalypse in the best way I can, once upon a time the devil itself was reincarnated as a Japanese girl, and that girl's name was Junko Enoshima. Officially known as the ultimate fashionista, Junko secretly was also a great analyst and was able to predict every situation and people's reactions. Unsurprisingly, being able to predict everything that's going to happen around you gets extremely boring extremely quickly, and Junko basically had no meaning in life. But there was one instance where Junko could not recognize or even assume what was going to happen. When someone was at the brink of madness and at the end of the rope, when they were absolutely desperate, when they were in despair. Junko, as a result, became obsessed with despair and wanted everyone in the world to feel that despair, just to end her boredom. So, during her time at Hope's Peak Academy, which is basically high school Harvard, complete with covering up horrific events that happen at and allowing people to come in if they pay a whole bunch of money, set her plan in motion. There's no way in hell you are convincing me to say every step of her plan, but basically she kidnapped an animator, forced the entire student council to kill each other, and recorded the whole thing knowing the school would cover it up, revealed that video of the student council killing each other along with some other shit the school was covering up to the students who paid to attend Hope's Peak, known as the reserve course, more on them in a second, since they're treated as lesser than those who were scouted, but before that, forced the animator to add subliminal messaging to the video, which then forced all 2,300 reserve corps students to kill themselves, knowing the school would try to cover that up too, and when that failed, watched as the Air National fallout somehow caused so much civil unrest that the world ended. Well, that's kind of unfair. It's not like the world just ended. Junko definitely helped push it in that direction in that regard. See, during that time she also kidnapped the class above her full of ultimates and brainwashed them into becoming her minions, which on paper sounds only mildly concerning, and then when you see the ultimates that were in that class, such as the ultimate princess, yakuza, mechanic, imposter, then you get a feeling for how awful this situation was. There was also that time she kidnapped 5 children for being abused by their parents, convinced them that murder is not only okay but actually ideal, and then when she died, they basically turned the island they were living on into Children of the Corn. Oh yeah, she died. That did nothing to stop the apocalypse. For a while, it actually made it worse. The world itself, by the time the series starts, is somewhere between apocalyptic wasteland and in the first stages of rebuilding itself, but to be honest, the current state of the world in Danganronpa is not what got on this list. No, what got on this list is just how insane its cause was. I just can't get over the fact that in Danganronpa, the world ended because a teenage girl got bored and basically ended it for funsies. Then, after she and her classmates locked themselves in the school, she somehow erased their memories, put cameras everywhere so that the rest of the world could see what was happening, and then forced them to kill each other by convincing them that the world hadn't ended and that only maybe a couple hours passed since they started their first day at Hope's Peak Academy. Kadaka, what the fuck? I love the Danganronpa series, it's one of my favorite gaming franchises, but there is something darkly hilarious about just how bonkers our apocalypse is. And that, my friends, is why it's on this list. God help us, why does a series exist? Hey, remember how in 2018 there were 2 horror films that had monsters that essentially made having one specific sense basically useless? The war between A Quiet Place and Bird Box was a very short-lived one. Bird Box came after Quiet Place, Bird Box was accused of being a Quiet Place ripoff, Quiet Place got more money, and Bird Box just kind of faded into obscurity. And when researching these movies and watching these movies, I have to straight up say something. A Quiet Place is a better movie, but Bird Box is a better apocalypse. I'm gonna be honest, I don't understand why people hate Bird Box so much. If it was just the A Quiet Place comparisons, then it would make a bit more sense, though still be kind of stupid. But people seem to hate Bird Box as its own individual movie. And that baffles me. This is a movie that has creatures where, if you look at them, you are driven to suicide by any means you can get your hands on. And if you're insane, instead of making you kill yourself, you just go even more insane and become a disciple of the terrifying monsters and try to force everyone else to open their eyes, to look at this monster, to kill yourself. So you have an even bigger reason for not trusting humanity than in your average apocalyptic movie. It's literally just a happening, but good. How do people not like this? There is very little about Bird Box I can say without spoiling it, and I really don't want to do that. But once again, it comes down to the character dynamics for me. Mallory's character development is nice to watch, and Olympia deserves the world. And my love of the film definitely comes from just how terrifying this kind of apocalypse would be. A monster that might not be able to touch you, but it doesn't need to kill you. And if it can't touch you, its followers will. No one knows what it looks like, so no one can figure out even a glimpse of what they have to avoid. But they just know that if it's a windy day, to stay indoors and close your eyes. That's terrifying to me. I've heard theories about how this movie might just be a very strange horror adaptation of The Rapture or some other event of biblical proportions. And even though I'm not fully buying into those theories, the fact that we can compare that kind of event to these monsters just makes Bird Box that more interesting to me. Before we get to number 1, here are some honorable mentions, as there are never too many ways to try to end the world in fiction. Hunger Games. The premise is interesting, but the series is pretty vague about whether the entire world ended or if it's just the US, so it was disqualified. Legend of Zelda: Breath of the Wild. Beautiful depiction of society slowly building itself with the best incarnation of Link. There, I said it! But Ganon himself brings the games and the apocalypse's fun factor way down. Mad Max Fury Road. This was actually originally number 5 and probably should still be number 5 based on the cinematography and editing alone, but Zombieland just made me smile more. Little Nightmares. This apocalypse is essentially Gargantua, but with capitalism, cannibalism, and black magic. It's really good, but I also don't know how much of it is canon and how much I've just been reading that is fan theories. Now, on to number 1. So, fun fact, for this list while gathering entries, I basically did one of 3 things. I went through my own memories looking for apocalypses I liked. I asked some other people what kind of apocalypses they liked and went to view them to see if I agreed with them. And I scoured every single apocalypse page on TV Tropes seeing if there was anything I missed. And when I came across this apocalypse, it occurred to me that it was an apocalypse. And I just didn't really register it as that in my mind. And yet it is! The entire world ends! The very first thing you see is the fact that the world is in ruins, and yet it never occurred to me that this is an apocalypse. And not only does it count as my favorite apocalypse, it is one of my favorite movies of all time. There's really no beating perfection. And if you haven't seen WALL-E yet, what are you doing? For those who are clearly more unfortunate than I am and haven't seen this film yet, I'm going to keep it to the basics. WALL-E's apocalypse is the embodiment of a cautionary tale. I know that Pixar said that it wasn't meant to be social commentary, but come on. Consumerism, greed, and environmental neglect, and overall from the state of the sky, most definitely climate change, have resulted in the Earth being covered in skyscraper-high mountains of trash. And the ones who saved humanity are likely the ones who contributed to the Earth's destruction the most. By and large, Pixar's equivalent of Walmart, which builds these giant cruise ships for space to put humanity on and send them on a tour that will never end. Meanwhile, back on Earth are a whole bunch of robots meant to clean up Earth and make it sustainable for human life again. Not that many of them are apparently operational anymore. The world of WALL-E is terrifying due to how possible it is. People, but especially big corporations, neglecting the Earth to the point where it is utterly destroyed, and instead of making an effort to fix it themselves, just try to escape. And then, when we finally see humans, they're still being fed a consumeristic lifestyle. One of the most hilarious and yet somehow disturbing lines in the entire film for me is, "Try blue, it's the new red." And I don't know why that sentence feels so wrong to me, but it makes me uncomfortable. Even if the existential, guilt-tripping horror in a kid's film that is specifically telling you about the side effects of the society we currently reside in bothers you, WALL-E is still a famously gorgeous movie to watch. The first third of it has basically no dialogue unless you turn on subtitles, and yet you can follow exactly what's going on because it's just that well animated and directed. Watching this precious love story between two robots amongst this troubling of a setting with animation this gorgeous, is it a wonder that this is my favorite apocalypse? What's better is that the love story doesn't detract at all from the fact that the world and the aftermath are screwed. In fact, both of these plot lines wrap around each other perfectly. One might say that WALL-E is a predictable choice, but that's because when it comes to Pixar films, it's almost the right choice. There are very few films that people agree could take WALL-E's place as the best Pixar movie. And those films aren't apocalypses, so there's a reason why WALL-E still tops Pixar best film lists 12 years after its release. Yeah, it's been 12 years. Between a frighteningly real apocalypse and a wonderful story that is set in it, WALL-E is by far my favorite apocalypse. Well, if that just doesn't sum up what's been happening so far, huh? Listen, originally I have this whole thing planned out about talking about how 2021 can be a better year than 2020 and avoid the apocalyptic BS because we can physically make a difference and stuff like that, but I'm recording this on January 7th, the day after Congress was stormed, so I'm just going to ad-lib here a bit. The world sucks right now. There's no denying that. Even in the areas of the world where it doesn't suck, there's still a whole bunch of uncertainty and fear. And there's really nothing that I, a college student who still has to go through her senior year, has to say about that. But basically what I can say is essentially this doesn't necessarily mean that 2021 is going to be a continuation of 2020. We've been making jokes about 2021 or something like that, but basically I say that 2020 is just getting the rest of its nonsense out of its system, or more specifically, people who thought that they ended up deserving something that they really didn't are getting the rest of it out of their system. It's terrifying right now. I'm not gonna be in denial of that. I'm scared. But to be honest, I'm too tired to feel that fear and dread I felt through 2020. It was, mentally speaking, one of my worst years, if not the worst year when it came to my mental health. And I have decided that I'm just not going to let 2021 bother me as much. Other people are assholes. Other people are hateful and they suck, and things like WALL-E or even Gargantia, stuff like that is possible. That's because humans suck. But that doesn't mean that the rest of us need to suck or give in to the sucky people. It just means that people suck, and that's something we have to deal with and fight against. That's basically all it means. So whether that means straight up ignoring them, or straight up fighting against them, or more specifically when it comes to ignoring them, not letting them get to you while you just try to do something that counteracts what they're doing, I'd say do that. Do what you think makes the world a better place, as long as your definition of a better place means making it a better place for the most amount of people, including, or even especially, people who you might not necessarily get along with, for something that they have no control over, or something that's really petty. So I don't know how to end this properly. This is literally just a video topic I've considered before 2020 even ended, and then my plans for a good portion of the script got thrown out the window. So I'm going to just end it here before I get ahead of myself. Next video is going to ideally be a lot more optimistic. So I guess I'll just see you in a bit, media lovers.